Tonight, the political atmosphere in Washington feels different. There's a tension in the air that even seasoned observers say they haven't felt in quite some time. What began as a routine political disagreement has slowly transformed into something much larger, a movement gaining momentum, a narrative shifting in real time, and a former president once again standing at the center of a rapidly evolving political storm. The phrase being repeated across newsrooms, social platforms, and political circles is simple but powerful. Donald Trump may be entering what analysts are calling a political danger zone. Now, when we talk about a danger zone in politics, it doesn't necessarily mean immediate collapse or crisis. Politics rarely works that way. Instead, it refers to a moment when multiple pressures begin converging at once: legal scrutiny, public opinion shifts, internal party tensions, and grassroots activism, all moving in directions that create uncertainty. And uncertainty, more than anything else, is what political strategists fear the most. Over the past several weeks, a petition that many initially dismissed as symbolic has quietly crossed a major milestone. At first, it appeared to be just another online campaign, one of thousands launched every year. But something unexpected happened. The numbers didn't slow down. Instead, they accelerated. Signatures continued climbing, drawing attention not only from activists, but from lawmakers, commentators, and eventually national media outlets. What makes this moment significant is not just the petition itself, but what it represents. Petitions rarely change policy overnight. They rarely force immediate political action, but they do serve as indicators, early warning signals showing where public sentiment may be heading. And according to several political analysts, this particular milestone suggests a level of engagement that campaigns cannot afford to ignore. Inside political strategy rooms, numbers matter. Trends matter even more. Campaign advisors often look less at individual headlines and more at patterns forming beneath them. When participation grows consistently across different demographics and regions, it signals energy. And energy, whether supportive or critical, reshapes political calculations. For Donald Trump, who has built much of his political identity on strong public connection and loyal voter enthusiasm, shifts in public engagement carry extra weight. His political strength has historically come from mobilization, the ability to energize supporters at rallies, dominate media cycles, and control narratives through direct communication. But moments like this introduce a different kind of conversation, one not entirely driven by campaign messaging. Supporters argue the petition reflects coordinated opposition rather than genuine public sentiment. Critics, on the other hand, see it as evidence of growing concern among voters who want accountability and clarity moving forward. And somewhere between those two interpretations lies the real story, a political environment becoming more polarized, more reactive, and more unpredictable. What's particularly interesting is how quickly the conversation spread beyond traditional political spaces. Within hours of the milestone announcement, discussions began trending online. Commentators debated its meaning. Analysts compared it to past political movements. Even neutral observers started asking a bigger question: does this signal a turning point, or is it simply another moment in America's ongoing political cycle? To understand why this matters, we have to step back and look at timing. The United States is approaching another critical election season. Every development right now is being viewed through an electoral lens. Every headline becomes part of a larger narrative shaping voter perception months, sometimes years, before ballots are cast. Political momentum often changes slowly, then suddenly. History shows that seemingly small developments can snowball into defining campaign issues. A single legal case, a viral moment, or a grassroots campaign can redefine priorities almost overnight. Strategists on both sides know this, which is why reactions to the petition milestone have been unusually swift. Behind closed doors, party officials are reportedly analyzing what this surge means for independent voters, the group many believe will ultimately decide future elections. Independent voters tend to respond less to partisan messaging and more to broader themes like stability, leadership tone, and institutional trust. When civic engagement spikes outside traditional party structures, it attracts immediate attention. Meanwhile, Trump himself has remained characteristically vocal, framing criticism as politically motivated while reaffirming confidence in his support base. That response aligns with a strategy he has used repeatedly, confronting controversy directly rather than avoiding it. For supporters, this reinforces an image of resilience. For critics, it raises further questions about political division. The media landscape surrounding this moment also plays a major role. Modern political narratives no longer unfold over weeks. They evolve hour by hour. Cable news debates amplify reactions, social media accelerates emotional responses, and digital platforms create echo chambers where interpretations quickly harden into beliefs. And yet, beneath the noise, a quieter conversation is emerging, one focused less on personalities and more on political fatigue. Many voters, according to recent surveys, express exhaustion with constant conflict. They want stability, predictability, and solutions rather than endless confrontation. Whether this petition reflects that sentiment or simply intensifies division remains an open question. Political historians often describe moments like this as inflection points, not decisive endings, but crossroads where multiple futures remain possible. One path leads to renewed political strength through mobilization and counter-messaging. Another leads to prolonged controversy that distracts from campaign priorities. Which direction events take depends largely on how leaders respond in the days and weeks ahead. What cannot be ignored, however, is visibility. The Milestone transformed what was once a niche campaign into a national conversation. Visibility changes stakes. Once an issue reaches mainstream awareness, silence becomes impossible. Every response, or lack of response, becomes part of the story itself. Across Washington, reactions have ranged from cautious concern to outright dismissal. Some lawmakers warn against overestimating online activism, noting that digital engagement doesn't always translate into electoral outcomes. Others argue that ignoring grassroots signals has historically been a costly mistake. And this is where the narrative becomes deeply human. Politics is not just strategy charts and polling numbers. It is emotion, perception, and storytelling. Millions of people interpret events through personal experiences, economic realities, and cultural identity. A petition milestone becomes meaningful not because of numbers alone, but because of what people believe those numbers represent. For Trump's supporters, the moment may feel like another challenge reinforcing a familiar narrative of political opposition. For critics, it may feel like momentum building toward accountability. For undecided voters, it may simply raise questions. And in politics, questions can be more powerful than answers. As the story continues unfolding, one thing is clear. This is not an isolated headline. It is part of a broader sequence shaping the political landscape heading into a crucial period. Every speech, every reaction, every new development will now be interpreted through the lens created by this milestone. And tonight, as analysts examine data and campaigns refine strategies, the central question remains unresolved. Is this the beginning of a genuine political shift, or merely another chapter in an already turbulent era of American politics? The answer may not arrive immediately, but the pressure surrounding Donald Trump has undeniably intensified, and the coming days could determine whether this moment fades quietly or becomes a defining turning point. Because in modern politics, the danger zone is not defined by one event alone. It is defined by accumulation, pressure building slowly, narratives aligning unexpectedly, and public attention locking onto a single storyline at exactly the right moment. And right now, all signs suggest that storyline is only just beginning. As the conversation surrounding the petition continued to expand, something subtle but important began to change inside the broader political ecosystem. What had initially been treated as a digital headline started influencing real-world reactions. Lawmakers who had avoided commenting were suddenly being asked direct questions by reporters. Campaign strategists began adjusting messaging. Television panels extended discussions that were originally meant to last only a few minutes into full-length debates. The story was no longer about a number on a screen. It had evolved into a test of political momentum. In politics, perception often moves faster than reality. A development does not need to immediately alter laws or elections to reshape narratives. All it needs is sustained attention. And attention, once captured, becomes its own form of power. The petition's milestone created exactly that, a focal point where supporters, critics, and undecided observers could project their expectations about the future. Across Washington, advisors closely monitored how different voter groups were reacting. Younger voters appeared more engaged online, sharing commentary and debating implications in large numbers. Older voters, traditionally less active in digital campaigns, began encountering the story through television coverage and radio discussions. That crossover between online activism and traditional media marked a critical moment. Political analysts often say a movement becomes significant when it escapes its original platform and enters mainstream awareness. For Donald Trump, whose political career has been defined by dominating media cycles rather than reacting to them, this presented a unique challenge. Controlling the narrative becomes more difficult when multiple voices shape the discussion simultaneously. Instead of a single controversy with a clear timeline, this situation unfolded gradually, almost organically, making it harder to dismiss outright. Inside political circles, comparisons quietly emerged. Some analysts pointed to past moments when grassroots initiatives unexpectedly influenced national conversations. Others warned against exaggerating the impact, arguing that online engagement frequently appears larger than it ultimately proves to be. Yet even skeptics acknowledged one undeniable reality. The scale of attention meant campaigns on all sides now had to respond strategically. At rallies and public appearances, Trump continued projecting confidence, emphasizing loyalty among his supporters, and framing criticism as part of a familiar political struggle. His communication style remained consistent, direct, confrontational, and designed to energize audiences who view him as an outsider challenging entrenched systems. That consistency reassured his base, but it also reinforced polarization, keeping the issue alive in media discussions. Meanwhile, opposition figures approached the moment differently. Rather than celebrating prematurely, many adopted cautious language, emphasizing institutional processes and democratic participation. This careful tone suggested an awareness that political momentum can reverse quickly if expectations rise faster than outcomes. The American political landscape has entered an era where narratives evolve in real time. Social media reactions influence television coverage, which then feeds back into online discussions, creating a loop that accelerates emotional responses. Within this cycle, nuance often disappears. Complex political developments become simplified into competing storylines: victory or defeat, strength or vulnerability, momentum or decline. And yet, beneath the simplified narratives, voters often experience something far more complicated. Conversations with everyday Americans reveal mixed feelings: curiosity about accountability, concern about political stability, and fatigue from years of nonstop controversy. Many citizens are less interested in partisan conflict and more focused on economic security, healthcare costs, and community issues. Still, high-profile political moments inevitably draw attention because they symbolize larger questions about leadership and direction. Political psychologists often describe these moments as identity tests. Supporters interpret criticism as validation of their loyalty, while opponents interpret the same events as confirmation of their concerns. Each side sees reinforcement rather than contradiction. This dynamic explains why events like the Petition Milestone rarely produce immediate consensus, but instead deepen engagement across the political spectrum. Behind the scenes, campaign teams began recalculating risk. Elections are rarely decided by core supporters alone. They hinge on turnout and persuasion. Strategists ask difficult questions during moments like this. Does increased attention mobilize opponents more than supporters? Does controversy energize fundraising or distract from policy messaging? Does sustained scrutiny shift independent voters' perceptions over time? These questions have no instant answers, but campaigns must act as if the stakes are high. Messaging adjustments, speech framing, and media appearances become carefully planned responses to evolving narratives. Even silence becomes strategic, interpreted by observers as either discipline or uncertainty. As coverage intensified, another layer of discussion emerged: the legal and procedural implications connected indirectly to the petition's demands. Experts appeared on news programs explaining what actions were realistically possible and what remained symbolic. Their analysis highlighted a recurring feature of modern politics: the gap between public expectation and institutional process. While public movements can influence conversation rapidly, formal political mechanisms often move slowly, governed by rules designed to prevent sudden shifts. This contrast between urgency and procedure created tension within the public discourse. Some observers grew impatient, expecting immediate consequences. Others argued that democratic systems require deliberate pacing to maintain fairness and stability. The debate itself became part of the story, reflecting broader disagreements about how quickly political accountability should unfold. International observers also began paying attention. Global media outlets framed the situation as another example of America's deeply polarized political environment. For allies and rivals alike, U.S. domestic politics carries global implications, influencing economic confidence, diplomatic relationships, and perceptions of democratic resilience. At the same time, financial markets showed only modest reactions, suggesting investors viewed the situation as politically significant but not immediately destabilizing. This distinction matters because economic response often serves as a barometer of perceived risk. When markets remain steady, it signals expectations of continuity despite political drama. Still, the psychological impact on voters cannot be measured as easily as economic indicators. Public trust evolves gradually, shaped by repeated exposure to narratives rather than single events. The petition Milestone ensured that discussions about Trump's political future would remain prominent, reinforcing a sense that the coming election cycle may be unusually consequential. Media commentators began asking whether this moment represented a shift away from personality-driven politics toward institutional debates about accountability and governance. Others argued the opposite, that intense focus on individual figures demonstrates how central personalities remain to modern political storytelling. In many ways, both interpretations may be true simultaneously. Politics today operates at the intersection of personal narrative and systemic issues. Leaders symbolize broader ideological conflicts, turning policy disagreements into emotionally charged stories that audiences can easily follow. As days passed, the story refused to fade. New interviews, opinion pieces, and analysis segments kept revisiting the milestone, each adding a slightly different interpretation. The persistence of coverage indicated that journalists sensed ongoing relevance rather than a fleeting trend. For Trump's supporters, continued attention reinforced a narrative of resilience under pressure. For critics, it suggested accountability gaining traction. For undecided voters, it introduced uncertainty. And uncertainty often encourages closer attention to future developments. Political momentum rarely announces itself clearly. It builds through accumulation, headlines stacking upon headlines, conversations extending longer than expected, public curiosity refusing to disappear. The petition Milestone functioned as a catalyst, accelerating conversations already simmering beneath the surface. And perhaps most importantly, it changed expectations. Before the milestone, discussions about Trump's political standing followed familiar patterns. After it, analysts began openly questioning potential scenarios that previously seemed unlikely. Once new possibilities enter mainstream discussion, they reshape strategic thinking across the entire political landscape. As night falls in Washington and newsroom lights remain on well past midnight, one reality becomes increasingly clear. This story is no longer about whether the petition matters. The question now is how much it matters, and whether its influence will grow or gradually dissolve as new headlines compete for attention. Because in politics, the danger zone is not defined by immediate consequences. It is defined by sustained pressure, shifting perception, and the unpredictable reactions of millions of voters watching events unfold in real time. And with every passing day, the sense grows stronger that this moment may be setting the stage for a far larger political confrontation still waiting just over the horizon.